The award-winning fiction, poetry, and criticism of writer Amal El-Mohtar have appeared in publications ranging from Tor.com, Fireside Fiction, Lightspeed, Uncanny, and Strange Horizons, and in her own collection, The Honey Month. With Max Gladstone, she co-authored the multiple award-winning This Is How You Lose the Time War. Her most recent book is The River Has Roots. She is one of four featured authors for the Columbus Metropolitan Library's Columbus Book Festival to be held at the main library on July 12th, 13th. Welcome to Craft, Amal El-Mohtar.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, tell me about your latest novel, The River Has Roots, which you described on Instagram as being about, quote, murder ballads and grammar magic, sisters and singing.
Yes, thank you. It is all those things. Basically, it's a retelling of a ballad that I both fell in love with, but have always sort of felt kind of itchy about. That it's a ballad type called The Cruel Sister. So there are lots of different versions of this. The first version of it I heard was Lorena McKennett's The Bonnie Swans.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and Lorena McKennett, my countrywoman. And so I loved the song. The general shape of the song is that there are two sisters who are both being courted by the same man who is mysteriously never the villain of the ballad. And the older sister is jealous of the younger, and so she drowns her, as you do. And then the younger sister, who, while being drowned, goes through a series of transformations. She becomes a swan, then a harp, and then the harp sings the song of her murder and accuses her sister of having killed her, and then she comes to a bad end. And I always felt sort of provoked by this ballad because I am an eldest sister and I love my younger sister very, very much. I'm the eldest of four children. And my sister is the one next to me in age, and we are very close. And she's like my best friend, and has been for most of my conscious life.
Mhm.
So I really wanted to sort of rearrange, retell the ballad in a way that made more sense to me personally, to say something about my life. And There's a lot of so the general plot of the book then is that there are these two sisters, Esther and Isabel, and they love each other very much, and they live in this town called Thistleford. That's kind of on the borderlands with a place called Arcadia, which is basically fairyland. And there is a river that runs from fairy into the more mundane world, the River Liss. And there's kind of raw magic in this river that gets filtered out by willow trees that run alongside it. And Esther and Isabel are part of a family that basically takes care of these willows, farms them, and one of the ways that they have to look after them is by singing songs to them. And so there are these the first two willows that run along the rivers are called the professors. And they're these really old, gnarled, weird willows. So the sisters sing songs to them periodically in a way that kind of keeps this ecological balance of filtering magic out of the river so that it doesn't just run rampant
Mhm.
throughout their world. Um, and Because they have this kind of important position, by doing this, their lands are very desirable, and so they're being courted by. Esther, the eldest, is being courted by this man named Samuel Pollard, but she doesn't like him very much. She's much more interested in this Arcadian named Rin. But everything is kind of complicated about dating someone who lives in fairyland.
Right,
So
as one can
complications
imagine.
ensue. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So has your sister read the book?
Yes. Not
Okay.
only did she read the book, she read the book while she was on a train. We live in and near Ottawa, and she was on a train to Montreal, and she just started texting me her live reactions as she was reading it, which was the most stressful possible thing. um and she did though ultimately love it. It is partly dedicated to her as well. It's
Okay.
dedicated to her and to my harp teacher Hoda Nassim, who passed away a couple of years ago. But yeah, they are both very important to me and or
Mhm.
important to my life with music as well.
Yes, your mentioning of the harp now makes the final piece fall into place about Lorena McKennitt
Yes.
and why you had felt compelled to fix this song for all the elder siblings in the world. I am a younger sibling, and
Ah.
so I can see the first version of it making the most sense.
Are
So
you the youngest, may I ask?
I am. I was the youngest of three,
Hmm.
and so but
That's a
there's two.
very charmed position for fairy tales. That's like the, always the youngest of three who goes out into the world and doesn't make the mistakes the elder ones do.
Sure, sure it is. Yeah, I'm sure all the third child syndrome will all, come up and agree with that. My late wife was the second of four
Mm.
and very into birth order.
Ah, yes.
So yeah, it was. If you're the third child, I think you tend maybe to pay a little less attention to it because you don't get a lot of credit as
Mm.
because the first child, like you, is more, that's the standard bearer. That's the first one. You get to do
Mm.
everything. You don't get hand-me-downs. I was
Interesting.
dressed nearly exclusively in hand-me-downs.
Interesting. I will say in my the it's interesting about the hand-me-downs, just as an aside, like I was the eldest of four in my immediate family, but my mother and my father are my mom is the youngest of six, and my father is the next to youngest of six.
Hmm.
And so I definitely got hand-me-downs from all of my older cousins.
Right.
So there was like this ordering of like the second generations and stuff that
Hmm.
happened in that way. I'll also say, just as a completely tangential point, that I've never felt more read for filth by a tweet than one that went, "Are you the eldest daughter of immigrants or are you normal?" Um, which had just haunts me to this day. I just feel like I should wear it as some sort of embroidery. But
Yeah,
yeah.
what do you think is I mean, what's your feeling that the background of that comment is?
Oh, just that, well, if you are the eldest daughter of immigrants, the general like line is that you are the first person to be born in the new country, right? So
Mhm.
like in
Right.
my case, so my parents are both originally from Lebanon, and they met in Canada. So I being the eldest, the way I see it is that I was sort of the guinea pig of a lot of stuff, and
Right.
also the one who was, tasked with, as other children were born, kind of, keeping the peace, looking after them, being the first babysitter, being like the kind of responsible one who is also part of the parenting structure and stuff.
Hmm.
And my youngest brother is 8 years younger than me, so there was like a significant gap there.
Right.
So I think there is generally a sense that if you're the eldest, if you're the eldest daughter, generally there is this idea that you receive responsibilities first that follow with your siblings. But if you are the eldest daughter of people who are also kind of, don't have the immediate um don't have all the privileges of birthright citizenship and had to like earn it. There are like language barriers. There are all sorts of things that the eldest kind of helps to navigate there. So it's like an extra layer of responsibility,
Right.
of being like a translator and a go-between and a mediator. It's kind of like a navigational element, I
Hmm.
think.
Right. Yeah. Whereas when you're the eldest of people who've been in the States for a while, you get to determine how to hand out the beatings.
Oh gosh.
That's a very so
Wow.
as three boys.
I
Three
was
boys.
gonna say there's a gendered element here. I feel.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. My mother used to tell this,
Yeah.
and with tangential here, my mother used to tell the story of taking somebody in for, I think it was a broken leg,
Mm.
and the doctor said, "How did this happen?" And she said, "Do you want his story, or the kids next door?"
Oh my
So,
gosh.
so a lot about families in this book. I
for sure.
also noticed getting back to your important work, the beginning of your book reads,
Mm.
and I'm going to quote it: "Grammar and grammarians are constables, sternly watching you while you split infinitives, narrowing their eyes at spliced commas while smacking semicoloned truncheons against their palms." But that is not the truth of grammar. Not a lot of authors, I think, start their books with discussions of grammar. And as a recovering English teacher, I'm interested in knowing how often people flinch when you mention that, or you say, well, this is, as you said on Instagram, this is about grammar magic, which
Yeah.
you talk about, grammar books, and grimoires and things like that having
Yeah.
a similar etymological background.
Exactly. So I too taught English was the thing. And so I grew up I was born in Ottawa, which is in Ontario in
Mhm.
Canada, but I grew up in the province of Quebec, just across the river basically. So I grew up going to French school, and in French school they really drill you on grammar. Like they teach you grammar as a matter of course. You learn verb forms, you learn parts of speech in a way that I realized when I went to university in Ontario was not the case with a lot of students who went through the English school system. There's just a way in which English is absorbed by osmosis. You know, it's the it's just like the most prevalent language, even in an officially bilingual country like Canada. There just everyone speaks English usually much more easily or frequently, gets exposed to it through media and so on. So people would be fluent in English, but when it came to like writing, and these are like native English speakers who don't speak other languages, just would have no idea how to write or punctuate a sentence. And so there were like one of my first jobs as like a teaching assistant in university was just to try and like remediate students who had not been taught grammar in high school, to just kind of give them a crash course of it in the first year of university. And my sort of way of attempting to ease students into this was to say, I know you think grammar is boring and tedious and dusty and dry and stuff, but actually its origins are rooted in magic. And we should talk about it from that perspective, that there is
Mhm.
this enormous power to it. And just to kind of, to give them some point of entry into something that I find really fascinating. So, there are a bunch of ways of talking about this. You can just look at the etymology and see that yes, like grammarly and grimoire all have the roots of the same words of grammar. But the other way of thinking about it is that grammar, because it's a way of ordering language, is a way of ordering thought, and is a way of like
Mhm.
organizing and getting other people by reading you to organize their own thoughts in the way that you have intended. So there's a very real way in which grammar is uh, a means of working your will in the world, which is a very literal definition of magic as well. Like the idea of just
Mhm.
things happen in the world because you will them to. And I think that grammar and writing and systems of language are all kind of connected to that. So in the book, instead, I don't think I use the word magic. Um, no, it does come up, but like the way that people talk about things that are magical is to say that this is grammar. There's grammar in the water, there's grammar in the air whenever
Mhm.
something magical is happening. And I wanted to see what it would do to someone's experience of the word grammar, where in our own associations is one that is very kind of tediously scholastic, that kind of has these associations of just being really bored and not having any practical application if you can just communicate with people effectively, regardless of knowing what a part of speech is.
Right.
But I think that it's one of those things that when you do learn the rules and you learn how to break them in ways that are more effective or interesting, then you can do all sorts of really cool things with the way that people experience your words.
Yeah, I remember part of the English teaching curriculum was you have to demonstrate that you have control over grammar before you can begin breaking it. And then, of
Mm-hmm.
course, you get into Finnegan's Wake and things like that, where there's
Yeah.
nothing seems to be everything's up for grabs. Who has any idea what's actually happening?
Yeah.
So yeah.
There was also a thing that I was very surprised by when I came across it, and then it was like, well, of course, why would I not have thought this before? But years ago, I was living in the UK, and I found myself in the university library of the University of Glasgow. And I was doing some research there for things that don't bear mentioning. But anyway, I just found myself in the stacks, and there was this row of dictionaries that said they were dictionaries of world Englishes. And just the fact that, like, something like world Englishes was already a kind of like interesting and provocative idea. And so I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I pulled the Canada one off the shelf, and I was really curious, like, what would this dictionary have to say about Canadian English? And it said some really interesting things.
Yeah.
Like, apparently, we have in Canada much less variation in our accents and dialects in English in cities than we do it between. Like, there's more difference between cities and rural areas than there is between a city on the East Coast and a city on the West Coast, for instance.
Really.
Um, there's a much more like urban rural divide in the way that according to this dictionary, which again I can't stress enough, I read a few paragraphs from like a decade ago.
Mhm.
But I found that fascinating, and the reason the dictionary gave for this was that Canada has a disproportionately large middle class, and that what you get across a lot of these urban centers is a kind of middle class accent that is kind of in conversation with like CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and television and stuff like that. So while there are distinct regional accents in places like Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, and the Maritimes have kind of their own history, the way this was being presented broadly is that there's a lot less regional variation, but a lot of like urban rural variation
Mhm.
that kind of followed class distinctions in that way, which I found fascinating, and things that I didn't know about my country at the time that I
Yeah.
learned by picking up a dictionary of world Englishes.
Yeah, it's also it's almost a classicist statement to say a
Mm.
disproportionately large. I mean,
It's
what
interesting, right?
what would you like?
What would yeah? What is the correct proportion?
It seems in the United States, every effort is being made to get rid of the middle class at the moment.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
it is an interesting comment.
yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to take up all of your
Mm.
time. I know you've got important things to do, but there's one other question I wanted to
Mm.
ask you. You have been
Sure.
the New York Times science fiction and fantasy columnist for 7 years.
Yeah.
So,
Gosh.
what got you into sci-fi and fantasy? A lot of people have the gateways of Star Trek, Star Wars,
Mm.
Battlestar Galactica, all kinds of other things. And now I've proven my predilection for watching more than reading. But when I
Right.
was young, I read the Foundation series from
Mm.
Asimov and all that kind of stuff, and all of the Hobbit stuff.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Except the Silmarillion, which I made about 10 pages into and realized I probably couldn't reliably pronounce Silmarillion or understand what was going on in it. So,
Oh man. So The Hobbit is very much like the entry point for me. There's actually an interesting melange for me of a few different things. There was so I was like I say I was born in Canada, but I lived in Lebanon for 2 years when I was little, and those 2 years were this like really concentrated um foundational period for all of my reading in a lot of ways. I was there from like age 7 to 9, and I read in that time The Hobbit and fell in love with it and really made it my personality. Like I memorized the songs and riddles in it. I would, make up melodies for the songs, and sing them
see,
obnoxiously to
that's
whoever was
something
listening.
only an oldest
You're absolutely
sibling could get
correct.
away with because the younger siblings would be beaten for this. What are you
Oh
singing a Hobbit
no.
song?
No. Oh gosh. There was so I so there was that, but at the same time I was also reading novelizations of Doctor Who, which I didn't realize were novelizations. I just thought they were books of like I didn't have that television
Right.
there. So and this lasted for a ridiculously long time. Like it literally in what was it 2002 when they did the reboot. with Christopher Eccleston, I got super excited and I started telling my friends out loud with my mouth, wow, I can't believe they're making my childhood books into a TV show. This is so exciting. And then they very gently explained that it
Hmm.
was a TV show first and had been for many, many decades. At which point, like, I got very, very into it. But Star Trek: The Next Generation was also a huge touchstone for me. I started watching that in reruns, I guess, when I was very little. I went to, I think, was this my first outing to a movie theater? Maybe not. It's one of the most memorable outings to a movie theater was to go see Generations, the film, when it came out.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think I was like 9 years old at the time, and it was just, it has. I will make no statement as to the quality of that film. I was 9. I was very excited, just to kind of see all my favorite characters there, and so there was all of that, but the Hobbit was really the kind of foundational one, and I definitely, I think, read more fantasy than science fiction when I was little. Star Trek took up a lot of cognitive space for me, as it were,
Hmm.
but since then, like, I, branched out into a lot of different directions, but I would also just read anything with pages that I could get my hands on,
Hmm.
for a long time, and then but needed recommendations. Actually, novelizations continue to be this interesting thing for me. Peter David passed away very recently, and he wrote novelizations of Star Trek things. And when I was, obsessed with Star Trek, I would go to the library, and I didn't really understand authorship, I guess, at that point in time. So I thought there could just be like a bunch of Star Trek novels that would be on their own spot on the shelf. But I was confused as to why they were like scattered throughout the library because they were written by different people,
Right.
obviously.
Yeah.
But once I found Peter David's section, there were like a bunch right next to each other. So I read like Imzadi and um, like a bunch of his other novels that now I'm not going to remember all the names of. But anyway,
Right.
that was like another way in which I was reading books, but I was also like loving a TV show, and stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I thank you very much for talking to me today. I will not soon forget someone believing that Doctor Who was a novelization. Were novels first. That is excellent.
I will say too,
Um,
it was Terrence Dicks's novelizations. It was like Planet of the Daleks was like the first thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember. I think I've seen all those. That was probably a Tom Baker, if I
It was
remember
I
correctly.
think it was a John Pertwee. John
John
Pertwee was
Pertwee.
technically my first Doctor by virtue of being illustrated on the cover of these books and I like
Yeah.
his lace cuffs and
Well,
everything. But
I
yeah.
discovered Doctor Who sometime like 85,
What?
86, because I'm a little bit older and quite a bit older. And I had to watch it in the only TV that would get the station, because I think it came out of Detroit. I lived near Toledo,
Okay.
so you had to have the rabbit ears done just the right way. It was a
Mm.
black and white TV. It was on the second story and got better reception. Also, no one
Wow.
else would watch it on the main TV downstairs.
Oh.
So, everything that I watched, I didn't know for a while that it was in color because I watched it on a black and white TV.
Wow.
So there
Oh,
you
that's
go.
so cool, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you ever
The
gone
rest,
back and watched them in color?
yeah, I've seen a lot of them in color. The sort of amusing part of that is that my dad was the superintendent, and I got into trouble at school, but I didn't tell him. And then the next day I came home, and I had gotten the TV in my room. I don't remember why. In the dust outline where the TV used to be was a copy of the disciplinary notice,
Oh my gosh! Oh, that is thrilling.
which is
That
my father's way of saying, you screwed up. You think you're going to get away with it. You're not going to get away with it. You
wow.
already know what your punishment is. You've lost your television.
Oh no.
So that was the end of watching Doctor Who for quite a while
Oh my
until
gosh.
later. But
Wow.
any rate, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you at the Columbus Book Festival on July 12th through 13th, and have a great time at your house in Canada and doing all the things you're doing up there.
Thank you so much.